Welcome to Nocturnal Knowledge. Today, we're exploring The History of Money by Jack Weatherford. Settle in as we journey through the complete text. If you enjoy this exploration, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more deep dives into the world's most influential books. Our journey begins now. So, we've begun our journey into the fascinating world of money. And the very first question we must ask is, how did people exchange goods and services before the existence of coins and bills? The answer lies in a system as old as civilization itself: barter. Imagine a world without currency. A world where you trade your extra chickens for a neighbor's woven basket or your handcrafted pottery for a skilled hunter's venison. This is the essence of barter, a direct exchange of goods and services without the intermediary of money. But barter, while seemingly simple, had significant limitations. Think about it. Trying to find someone who simultaneously needs what you have to offer and has what you need is a logistical nightmare. This is what economists call the double coincidence of wants, and it severely restricted trade. For example, if you're a skilled blacksmith with a surplus of horseshoes, finding someone who both needs horseshoes and possesses something you desire, perhaps a goat, would be incredibly challenging. This inherent inefficiency was one of the fundamental drivers of the evolution of more sophisticated exchange systems. As societies grew and trade became more complex, the limitations of barter became more acutely apparent. This necessity led to the emergence of commodity money. The book highlights a fascinating example: the use of cacao beans, yes, chocolate, as currency amongst the ancient Aztec civilization. They weren't just enjoying their chocolate, they were using it as a medium of exchange, valuing it for its consistent quality and relative scarcity. This illustrates a key characteristic of commodity money. It derives its value from the inherent properties of the commodity itself. However, chocolate, despite its delightful qualities, wasn't ideal. Perishable, bulky, and subject to spoilage, it lacked the permanence and portability necessary for widespread use. Hence the gradual shift towards more durable and universally desirable commodities. Gold, with its inherent luster, durability, and relative scarcity, emerged as a dominant commodity money, gradually eclipsing other materials. Its value wasn't assigned, it was inherent, derived from its rarity and desirable properties. The book eloquently explains how the love of gold, its symbolism of wealth, power, and beauty, further entrenched its position as the preferred medium of exchange. For centuries, gold played a critical role in the world's economic landscape, its value relatively stable compared to other commodities, making it a reliable store of value and a powerful symbol of wealth across various cultures. But even gold, this seemingly perfect commodity money, wasn't without its limitations. Its inherent scarcity meant a constant struggle for adequate supply to fuel growing economies, laying the groundwork for the evolution of even more sophisticated monetary systems that we will explore in the chapters ahead. The story of money, as you'll see, is a continuous journey of innovation, driven by the need to overcome the inherent limitations of each successive form of exchange. So, we've journeyed through the fascinating, if somewhat messy, world of barter and early commodity monies. Now let's delve into a material that truly transcended its practical uses to become the cornerstone of global economies for millennia: gold. Its rise wasn't accidental. It stemmed directly from several inherent properties that made it uniquely suitable as a form of currency. Gold's allure isn't merely aesthetic. Its scarcity, relative inertness, meaning it doesn't readily tarnish or corrode, and malleability, allowing it to be easily shaped into coins or other forms, proved invaluable. These qualities weren't lost on ancient civilizations. Think of the grandeur of Egyptian tombs overflowing with gold artifacts, a testament to its early recognition as a store of value, a symbol of wealth and power far exceeding its simple material worth. The development of coinage marked a pivotal moment. No longer were cumbersome bars of gold or other commodities necessary for transactions. Standardized gold coins, bearing the mark of authority, facilitated trade on an unprecedented scale. This ushered in the era of the gold standard, where a nation's currency was directly convertible to a fixed weight of gold. This system, though seemingly simple, had profound implications. The value of currency was tied directly to a physical commodity, theoretically creating stability and predictability, a welcome departure from the fluctuating values of earlier systems. Think of it like a global, universally understood measuring stick for wealth. But this system, while promoting some stability, also dramatically impacted the distribution of global economic power. Nations with access to significant gold reserves wielded immense influence on the world stage. Control over gold mines and trade routes became strategic imperatives, shaping geopolitical alliances and conflicts for centuries. The book describes the Spanish conquistadors' ruthless pursuit of gold in the Americas as a prime example, highlighting how the influx of New World gold fundamentally altered European economies, sparking inflation and reshaping the balance of power in a dramatic, often destructive way. The price revolution, as the book terms it, is a potent illustration of how the seemingly inert metal was anything but in its economic impact. It fueled empires, toppled them, and shaped the course of history in ways that few other commodities ever could. The allure of gold, both literal and metaphorical, permeated culture and economics, leaving an enduring legacy that extends even to today's complex financial world. Having explored the enduring allure and significance of gold, we now turn our attention to the burgeoning economies of ancient Greece and Rome, and the pivotal role early coinage played in shaping their societies. The rise of these empires wasn't simply a matter of military might, it was intrinsically linked to their innovative monetary systems. Imagine a world before standardized currency, a world of bartering where the value of goods was constantly negotiated, dependent on subjective estimations and fluctuating supply. This was the reality preceding the Greek invention of coinage, a development that fundamentally altered the economic landscape. The Greek genius, as the book so aptly puts it, lay in their creation of the first widely accepted standardized currency. These early coins, often bearing the image of gods or rulers, provided a tangible unit of account, facilitating trade on an unprecedented scale. This wasn't just a convenience, it triggered a market revolution. The standardization allowed for more efficient pricing and fairer transactions, fostering economic growth and specialization. Farmers could now easily exchange their produce for tools or textiles,
Artisans could specialize in their crafts, and merchants could engage in broader trade networks, expanding both their reach and profitability. However, the economic impact of these empires wasn't solely positive. The very power that allowed for large-scale economic activity also highlighted the inherent limitations of government control. The book details how the expansion of the Greek and later Roman empires, financed by conquest, often led to a government glut, a phenomenon where excessive government spending, think vast military campaigns and ambitious public works, destabilized the economy. This created inflation, debasement of the currency through the reduction of precious metal content, and ultimately economic hardship for the citizens. The Roman welfare state, for instance, while appearing benevolent, was ultimately unsustainable, relying on continually expanding conquest and economic exploitation to fund its generous social programs. This demonstrates a key insight. Even the most powerful states are ultimately subject to the economic laws of supply and demand, and unchecked power, even with the apparent benefits of a more expansive monetary system, can lead to disastrous consequences. The story of the Greek and Roman economies, therefore, is a fascinating case study in the double-edged sword of early monetary systems. They brought about unprecedented economic progress, enabling complex trade and specialization, but also exposed the vulnerability of even the most powerful states to the pitfalls of unchecked government spending and the inherent limitations of centralized control over the currency. The seeds of economic instability, sown in the very system designed to foster prosperity, offer a powerful lesson for understanding the intricate relationship between power, money, and the well-being of a society.
The medieval period, the emergence of banking and finance. Having explored the sophisticated, yet ultimately fragile monetary systems of the Greeks and Romans, we now leap forward to the medieval period, a time that witnessed the remarkable rebirth of finance and the emergence of institutions that would shape the future of money. Leaving behind the relative simplicity, or perhaps, depending on your perspective, the limitations of earlier systems, the Middle Ages saw the rise of powerful banking families, intricate networks of credit, and the beginnings of a financial landscape far more complex than anything previously witnessed. The Italian peninsula, a vibrant crossroads of trade and commerce, became the fertile ground for this financial revolution. The book highlights the pivotal role of Italian banking families, like the Medicis, the Fuggers, and the Perugis, names that still resonate today as symbols of wealth and power. These weren't simply moneylenders, they were pioneers in financial innovation, developing complex systems for managing credit, transferring funds across vast distances, and providing essential financial services to merchants, rulers, and the burgeoning merchant class. They weren't just handling physical gold and silver, they were essentially creating and managing what the book calls bank money, a concept far removed from the simple exchange of goods for coins. They understood the power of trust and reputation, and their success hinged on meticulous record-keeping and the delicate balance between risk and reward. Imagine a world where moving large sums of money across Europe was a perilous undertaking, fraught with the risk of robbery and theft. These families, through a network of agents and branches, offered a safer and more efficient way to conduct financial transactions. Laying the foundations for modern banking systems, they developed early forms of credit, allowing merchants to secure loans for investments, trade, and expansion. These loans, carefully documented and meticulously tracked, represented a remarkable advancement in financial sophistication, facilitating trade and economic growth across Europe. The book emphasizes that this wasn't merely about lending money, it was about managing risk, assessing creditworthiness, and understanding the complexities of international finance. Think of the impact this had. The ability to borrow money, to transfer funds securely, and to manage complex financial transactions revolutionized the way business was conducted. This wasn't just about individual fortunes, it was the engine of wider economic expansion and growth. The emergence of these powerful banking families and their sophisticated financial practices laid the essential groundwork for the modern financial world that we inherit today. The next sections delve further into the impact of this transformative period and will explore the evolution of money through the Renaissance and beyond.
From the intricacies of medieval banking and finance, we now journey to a period of unprecedented change, the Renaissance. This era, bursting with artistic brilliance and intellectual fervor, profoundly reshaped monetary systems, laying the groundwork for the modern world's economic landscape. The expansion of trade played a pivotal role. New sea routes, opened up by intrepid explorers, connected distant civilizations like never before. The influx of goods from the East, coupled with the burgeoning European markets, fueled an unprecedented surge in economic activity. Think of the spices from the Orient, the silks from the Far East, all demanding payment, creating a surge in demand for a stable and efficient monetary system to facilitate these burgeoning transactions. This period also saw the rise of powerful city-states, particularly in Italy, which became hubs of commerce and finance. Florence, Venice, and Genoa thrived, attracting merchants and bankers from across Europe. Their success wasn't simply about trade alone. The Renaissance saw a flourishing of art and patronage, where wealthy families, like the Medici, commissioned breathtaking works of art, fostering a vibrant cultural landscape. But this patronage wasn't purely altruistic. It was also an investment. The Medici, for instance, used their artistic patronage to enhance their prestige and solidify their economic power, demonstrating the inextricable link between art, economics, and the monetary system itself. Their financial acumen mirrored the precision and detail of their favored artists. The increased economic activity of this period demanded sophisticated financial instruments. The Italian banking families, renowned for their expertise in managing large sums of money across international borders, refined existing practices and innovated, creating new financial mechanisms to manage the complexities of these vast trading networks. They weren't just counting coins, they were shaping the very structure of finance, creating the prototypes for the modern banking systems we take for granted today. The sheer volume of transactions necessitated evolution of accounting practices and the development of sophisticated credit systems, a crucial element that would underpin future economic growth. We see a clear parallel here between the explosion of creative expression in art and the innovative spirit transforming the world of finance. The Renaissance, therefore, wasn't just a rebirth of classical learning and artistic achievement. It was a profound monetary revolution, laying the foundations for the globalized financial system we know today. Having witnessed the profound impact on the Renaissance on monetary systems, a period of burgeoning art, trade, and intellectual ferment, we now turn to a dramatic shift in the global economic landscape,
the price revolution. This period, spanning roughly from the 16th to the 17th centuries, was marked by a dramatic increase in prices, a phenomenon we know as inflation. But unlike the slow, creeping inflation we might experience today, this was a seismic event, reshaping societies and economies across Europe and beyond. The primary culprit? The massive influx of silver and gold from the newly discovered Americas. The conquest of the Aztec and Inca empires unleashed a torrent of precious metals into the European economy, far exceeding anything seen before. Imagine a world where the money supply suddenly doubles, triples, even quadruples overnight. That's essentially what happened. This influx didn't simply create more wealth, it diluted the existing value of money. The book describes this as a golden curse, a seemingly paradoxical situation where the arrival of immense riches brought about widespread economic hardship. The consequences were far-reaching and devastating. While initially some benefited, merchants, landowners, and those who held large amounts of cash, the majority suffered. The purchasing power of wages plummeted. A day's labor, once sufficient for a family's basic needs, became barely enough for a fraction of them. The book details accounts of widespread social unrest fueled by this sudden, dramatic inequality. Think of it as a massive wealth transfer, not through fair exchange, but through a systematic devaluation of the very currency that governed everyday life. The price of everyday goods soared. Food, clothing, and housing became increasingly unaffordable for the average person. This wasn't a gradual adjustment. It was a period of intense economic disruption, throwing established social structures into disarray. The author uses the analogy of a bridge of silver, a seemingly positive image, to highlight the destructive power of this influx. It was a bridge built on the exploitation of conquered peoples and led, ironically, to the collapse of economic stability in Europe. This period also saw the rise of what the book calls a money culture, where the acquisition and display of wealth became increasingly important, further exacerbating social tensions. The price revolution serves as a stark reminder of the delicate balance of economic systems and the potentially devastating consequences of uncontrolled inflation. It wasn't simply a rise in prices, it was a societal earthquake, altering the course of history in profound and lasting ways. The dizzying inflation of the price revolution, as we've just explored, profoundly impacted the European economic landscape. It created both chaos and opportunity, setting the stage for a dramatic evolution in banking practices during the Renaissance. This period witnessed not just the refinement of existing methods, but the genesis of truly international finance, a web of interconnected banking networks spanning continents. The Italian city-states, particularly Florence and Venice, were at the forefront of this transformation. Having mastered sophisticated accounting techniques centuries earlier, they were ideally positioned to leverage the burgeoning trade flowing through their ports. These weren't merely simple lenders, they were pioneers of sophisticated financial instruments, managing vast sums of money for wealthy merchants and even powerful monarchs. Think of the Medici family, for example. Their influence extended far beyond their artistic patronage. They wielded immense financial power, utilizing complex banking networks to transfer funds across Europe and beyond. Their success demonstrates the increasingly crucial role of banking in the functioning of the global economy. something completely different from the localized systems of the previous centuries. This wasn't simply about lending gold or silver. The Renaissance saw the rise of bank money, a revolutionary concept where credit and debt became as important as physical currency. The bankers created complex systems of credit and debit, allowing merchants to conduct transactions across vast distances without the cumbersome movement of precious metals. This new system of credit greatly facilitated trade, accelerating the pace of commerce. It was a powerful catalyst in the expansion of international trade, enabling transactions that would have been impossible under the older, more localized systems. The expansion of these banking networks was intimately connected to the broader flow of goods and information during the Renaissance. As trade routes expanded, so too did the need for reliable and efficient methods of transferring funds across vast distances. This led to the development of sophisticated international payment systems where letters of credit and bills of exchange became essential tools for managing cross-border transactions. The reach of these banking houses extended from the bustling marketplaces of Europe to the emerging trade centers of the East, underscoring the interconnectedness of the world economy during this period. It's a clear demonstration of how financial innovation can drive and be driven by globalization. These weren't isolated entities. They formed a complex, interdependent network that underpinned the economic growth of the era. The intricate web they spun connected merchants, princes, and even entire kingdoms, transforming the very nature of commerce and laying the foundation for the modern global financial system.
Early forms of paper money and its advantages. Having just explored the sophisticated banking practices that blossomed during the Renaissance, a period of unprecedented artistic and intellectual flourishing, we now turn our attention to a revolutionary shift in the very nature of money itself, the advent of paper currency. The burgeoning financial systems of the Renaissance, while impressive, still relied heavily on precious metals, gold and silver, as the foundation of their economic transactions. But the limitations of carrying around heavy, easily stolen coins and the logistical difficulties of accurately weighing and assessing their purity began to create a demand for a more practical, portable, and easily manageable form of exchange. This demand gave rise to early forms of paper money, a development that would reshape the global economy. One of the earliest examples of such paper money appeared in China as early as the 7th century, where the need to replace cumbersome metal coins was particularly acute. The initial forms weren't quite the currency we know today. They more resembled promissory notes issued by banks or merchants, essentially IOUs promising to repay the holder with a specific amount of silver or other commodities. However, this represented a crucial step in separating the concept of money from a physical commodity. The convenience offered by these notes, in essence the transferability of the IOUs, quickly made them popular. And this practicality proved to be the key advantage of paper money over its cumbersome commodity predecessors. Consider, for instance, the logistical nightmare of transporting vast quantities of silver across vast distances. Paper, being far lighter and more compact, drastically reduced the costs and risks of trade. This advantage proved especially significant in the burgeoning international trade of the time. Colonial empires, for instance, fueled a significant demand for efficient methods of transferring wealth across oceans, a demand that paper money uniquely fulfilled. Colonial governments frequently issued their own forms of paper currency, often backed by taxes or land values. These early colonial notes, while sometimes susceptible to volatility depending on the stability of their backing,
still demonstrated the power and practicality of paper as a medium of exchange, paving the way for the more standardized and widely accepted paper currencies we see today. The shift from commodity-based money to paper money was not merely a matter of convenience. It was a transformative event that unlocked new levels of economic activity and greatly facilitated global trade and commerce. This fundamental transition laid the groundwork for the complexities and challenges of modern monetary systems.
The American dollar and its global influence. Having examined the evolution of paper money and its advantages over earlier systems, we now turn our attention to a pivotal development, the rise of the American dollar and its profound impact on the global monetary system. The book details the birth of the dollar, tracing its origins not just as a unit of exchange, but as a reflection of America's growing economic might. It wasn't the sudden leap to global dominance, of course. The path was paved, as the text explains, by careful consideration of previous monetary systems, lessons learned from both success and failure in establishing a stable and widely accepted currency. This evolution is brilliantly documented, charting the dollar's gradual spread initially within the American colonies, then across the Pacific, before finally solidifying its position as a dominant force in international finance. Think of it, the authors suggest, as a slow burn, a steady accumulation of trust and reliability that gradually transformed a relatively new currency into a global standard. One passage particularly highlights this gradual evolution, stating, "The spread of the dollar wasn't a conquest, it was a quiet yet powerful expansion." This global influence wasn't accidental. The dollar's rise is inextricably linked to the expansion of American economic power following World War II. As the text illustrates, the United States emerged from the war as the leading industrial power, its economy largely unscathed and ready to fuel a global rebuilding effort. This provided the necessary infrastructure for the dollar to become the primary currency for international transactions. The Bretton Woods Agreement, for example, established a fixed exchange rate system pegged to the dollar, solidifying its status as the world's reserve currency. In other words, the dollar wasn't just a medium of exchange, it became the bedrock of the global financial system itself. The book meticulously analyzes how this system facilitated international trade. It emphasizes that the dollar's global dominance has both advantages and disadvantages, fostering ease of trade for some while creating vulnerabilities for others dependent on its stability. The authors draw analogies between this dependence and historical reliance on specific precious metals, illustrating the cyclical nature of trust and power in global monetary systems. They even suggest, in a truly captivating passage, that the dominance of the dollar presents a curious paradox. The very stability it provides can contribute to its own eventual vulnerability. This highlights a key point. While the dollar's role has undoubtedly boosted global commerce, it has also concentrated significant economic and political power in the hands of the United States. Understanding the rise of the dollar, therefore, is essential to understanding the history of the modern global economy. It's a story of ambition, strategy, and the enduring power of trust in shaping the intricate web of international finance.
The gold standard and its eventual abandonment. We've just explored the American dollar's remarkable journey and its impact on the global stage. Now let's delve into a system that profoundly shaped the dollar and many other currencies for centuries. the gold standard. Imagine a world where the value of your currency is directly tied to a tangible asset, gold. This was the core principle of the gold standard, a system where a country's currency could be freely converted into a fixed amount of gold. This created a sense of stability and trust. Currencies weren't subject to the whims of government manipulation, at least theoretically. The inherent value of gold acted as a global anchor, preventing runaway inflation and facilitating international trade. Governments couldn't simply print more money. Their ability to do so was limited by their gold reserves. This predictability fostered confidence in the financial system, both domestically and internationally. However, this seemingly robust system had inherent weaknesses. One significant flaw was its inflexibility. Economic downturns, for instance, couldn't be easily countered through monetary policy. If a country faced a recession, it couldn't simply increase the money supply to stimulate the economy because it was bound by its gold reserves. This rigidity could exacerbate economic crises, forcing countries to endure prolonged periods of deflation and unemployment. Furthermore, the gold standard relied heavily on the availability of gold itself. The uneven distribution of gold reserves across nations often created imbalances in the global economy, benefiting some countries at the expense of others. The system inadvertently rewarded countries with abundant gold resources while penalizing those with fewer. The strain on the gold standard became increasingly evident in the early 20th century. World War I dramatically altered the global economic landscape. The massive expenditure on warfare depleted national treasuries, making it difficult for countries to maintain the gold-backed exchange rates. After the war, economic instability and the rise of nationalism further weakened the system. Countries resorted to manipulating their currencies, devaluing them to gain a competitive edge in international trade. This undermined the very foundation of the gold standard, eroding trust in the system. The Great Depression dealt a devastating blow. Nations desperately sought ways to revive their economies, but the rigid constraints of the gold standard prevented them from implementing effective monetary policies. Countries were forced to abandon the system one after another, desperate to escape the economic quagmire. The final nail in the coffin was driven home in 1971 when President Nixon unilaterally abandoned the dollar's convertibility to gold, effectively ending the Bretton Woods system, which had attempted to create a modified gold standard. This decision, while controversial, marked the end of an era. The gold standard, once seen as a beacon of stability, had become a shackle on economic growth and flexibility. Its demise ushered in an era of fiat currencies, currencies not backed by any physical commodity, but by the faith and credit of the issuing government. This transition, while fraught with its own challenges, opened the door to more dynamic monetary policies, allowing governments to respond more effectively to economic fluctuations. The world's financial system has never looked back, but the legacy of the gold standard, with its strengths and significant flaws, continues to shape our understanding of monetary policy to this day.
The Great Depression and monetary policy. As we've just discussed, the abandonment of the gold standard didn't simply usher in a new era of monetary flexibility. it also dramatically altered the landscape of economic risk. The carefully calibrated system, however flawed, had provided a degree of stability, a perceived anchor in the turbulent sea of global finance. Its removal, however, revealed the fragility of the existing system, a fragility that would soon be brutally exposed. The Great Depression, a cataclysmic economic downturn unlike any seen before, stands as a stark testament to the pivotal role of monetary policy in shaping economic destinies, both for good and, more tragically, for ill. The years following the First World War saw a period of rapid economic expansion fueled by easy credit and a booming stock market. This prosperity, however, masked underlying vulnerabilities, an overextended credit system and an imbalance in international trade. When the stock market crashed in 1929, the carefully constructed house of cards collapsed. The initial response to the crisis was in many ways a failure of monetary policy. Central banks, clinging to a misguided belief in the self-correcting nature of markets, initially failed to take decisive action. The contraction of the money supply, driven by widespread bank failures and a general reluctance to lend, further exacerbated the economic downturn. This is where the analogy of a body's response to illness becomes useful. A fever is a natural response to infection, but if unchecked, it can be fatal. Similarly, a slight contraction in the money supply might be expected in a healthy economy, but during a depression, it becomes a killer. The consequences were catastrophic. Unemployment soared to unprecedented levels, businesses crumbled, and global trade plummeted. The Depression wasn't merely an economic crisis, it was a social and political earthquake, fostering disillusionment and paving the way for extremist ideologies. This wasn't just a matter of individuals losing jobs. It was a complete breakdown of economic order, threatening the social fabric itself. Only later and gradually did governments and central banks begin to grasp the need for more active intervention. The implementation of expansionary monetary policies involving measures such as lowering interest rates and increasing the money supply was slow and halting. Even then, the effectiveness of these policies was debated and hampered by political considerations and ideological disagreements. The full effects of the Great Depression and the lessons learned about government's role in managing financial stability would continue to shape economic policy for decades to come, leaving an enduring impact on our understanding of the delicate balance between free markets and intervention. The experience served as a brutal lesson, highlighting the devastating consequences of inaction and the crucial, even life-saving role of appropriate government intervention in mitigating economic crises. The legacy of the Great Depression would continue to resonate, influencing the development of economic theory and the practice of monetary policy long after the worst of the crisis had passed.
The medieval period, the emergence of banking and finance. Having explored the sophisticated, yet ultimately fragile monetary systems of the Greeks and Romans, we now leap forward to the medieval period, a time that witnessed the remarkable rebirth of finance and the emergence of institutions that would shape the future of money. Leaving behind the relative simplicity, or perhaps, depending on your perspective, the limitations of earlier systems, the Middle Ages saw the rise of powerful banking families, intricate networks of credit, and the beginnings of a financial landscape far more complex than anything previously witnessed. The Italian peninsula, a vibrant crossroads of trade and commerce, became the fertile ground for this financial revolution. The book highlights the pivotal role of Italian banking families, like the Medicis, the Fuggers, and the Perugis, names that still resonate today as symbols of wealth and power. These weren't simply moneylenders, they were pioneers in financial innovation, developing complex systems for managing credit, transferring funds across vast distances, and providing essential financial services to merchants, rulers, and the burgeoning merchant class. They weren't just handling physical gold and silver, they were essentially creating and managing what the book calls bank money, a concept far removed from the simple exchange of goods for coins. They understood the power of trust and reputation, and their success hinged on meticulous record-keeping and the delicate balance between risk and reward. Imagine a world where moving large sums of money across Europe was a perilous undertaking, fraught with the risk of robbery and theft. These families, through a network of agents and branches, offered a safer and more efficient way to conduct financial transactions. Laying the foundations for modern banking systems, they developed early forms of credit, allowing merchants to secure loans for investments, trade, and expansion. These loans, carefully documented and meticulously tracked, represented a remarkable advancement in financial sophistication, facilitating trade and economic growth across Europe. The book emphasizes that this wasn't merely about lending money, it was about managing risk, assessing creditworthiness, and understanding the complexities of international finance. Think of the impact this had. The ability to borrow money, to transfer funds securely, and to manage complex financial transactions revolutionized the way business was conducted. This wasn't just about individual fortunes, it was the engine of wider economic expansion and growth. The emergence of these powerful banking families and their sophisticated financial practices laid the essential groundwork for the modern financial world that we inherit today. The next sections delve further into the impact of this transformative period and will explore the evolution of money through the Renaissance and beyond.
Nixon's shock and the end of the gold standard. The Bretton Woods system, with its carefully calibrated exchange rates pegged to the US dollar, which in turn was backed by gold, had finally reached its breaking point. Years of escalating deficits, a weakening dollar, and growing international pressure had created a volatile situation. The system, designed to foster post-war stability, was now a source of instability itself. This is where President Richard Nixon's fateful decision comes into play. On August 15, 1971, in a televised address that shocked the world, Nixon announced the closure of the gold window. This seemingly simple act, the cessation of the U.S. government's exchange of dollars for gold, was nothing short of seismic. The gold window, for decades, had been the cornerstone of the global monetary system. It meant that foreign governments and central banks could redeem their dollar holdings for gold at a fixed price, $35 per ounce. But Nixon's decision shattered this fundamental agreement. Overnight, the dollar was no longer directly convertible to gold. This act effectively ended the Bretton Woods era, a period that had, in many ways, defined the post-World War II global financial landscape. The consequences were immediate and profound. The move triggered a period of significant uncertainty and volatility in global currency markets. Confidence in the dollar plummeted. The world plunged into an era of floating exchange rates, a financial free-for-all with potentially devastating implications. Consider the implications. The dollar, previously anchored to the tangible value of gold, now floated freely. Its value became dependent on market forces, supply and demand, investor sentiment, and international trade balances. This marked the decisive shift toward a global system dominated by fiat currency, money whose value is not based on a physical commodity like gold, but rather on the faith and credit of the issuing government. Think of it this way. For centuries, money's value had been grounded in something concrete. Now, it relied solely on trust. Trust in the stability of the issuing government's policies, the strength of its economy, and its ability to manage its debt. This transition wasn't without its critics. Many argued that the abandonment of the gold standard would lead to runaway inflation and economic instability. Others saw it as a necessary step to allow for greater flexibility in international trade and monetary policy. Regardless of perspective, Nixon's decision irrevocably altered the global financial landscape, ushering in an era of unprecedented monetary volatility and shaping the world economy as we know it today. The reign of gold, which had dictated the course of global finance for centuries, was officially over. The era of fiat money, with all its inherent uncertainties and potential risks, had begun.
The introduction of electronic banking and payments. The dismantling of the Bretton Woods system and the end of the gold standard, as we've just explored, ushered in an era of unprecedented monetary fluidity. Nixon's shock reverberated throughout the global financial system, creating a fertile ground for a radical transformation in how we handle money. The rise of electronic banking and payments. No longer tethered to the physical constraints of gold or even paper currency, money began its journey into the digital realm, a journey that continues to shape our economic landscape today. This shift wasn't a sudden revolution, but a gradual evolution. The first steps were tentative, almost hesitant. Credit cards, initially seen as a novelty for the affluent, began their slow but steady creep into the mainstream. Think of it like this. For centuries, exchanging goods and services was a fundamentally physical act, a tangible exchange of goods or coins. The credit card, however, introduced a new element, the promise of future payment, a deferred exchange based on trust and creditworthiness. It represented a subtle yet significant departure from the traditional understanding of money. The book vividly illustrates this transition, describing the magic card as a symbol of both democratic debt and the inherent risks of a credit-based system. It was a democratization, in a way. Access to credit, and therefore to goods and services, was no longer solely the privilege of the wealthy. Yet alongside this empowerment came the risks of debt and overspending, a double-edged sword that continues to define our financial reality. But the credit card was only the vanguard. The true revolution lay in the development of electronic banking itself. Suddenly, transferring funds became a swift, near-instantaneous process, a stark contrast to the laborious checks and trips to the bank of earlier generations. Money, once a physical entity, became increasingly dematerialized, existing as digital information flickering across computer screens and networks. Imagine the sheer scale of this transformation. Money's journey from heavy sacks of coins to ephemeral bits and bytes of data. The book paints a picture of this change, highlighting the increasing ubiquity of cashless transactions. It details the emergence of the electronic cash wars, describing the competition among different electronic payment systems, each vying for dominance in this new landscape.
The convenience and speed of electronic transfers were undeniable, but anxieties also arose. The ease with which money could be moved across borders, the potential for fraud and cybercrime, the growing dependence on complex technological systems. These were all concerns that emerged alongside the excitement and potential of this new monetary era. This subtle shift from physical to digital, from tangible coins to intangible data, laid the foundation for the modern, increasingly cashless world we inhabit today.
Hyperinflation and currency crises in the modern era. Having explored the rapid evolution of electronic banking and payments, we now turn our attention to a dramatically different and often devastating phenomenon: hyperinflation and its accompanying currency crises. These episodes, far from being relics of the past, are a stark reminder of the fragility of monetary systems, even in the modern era. They represent a catastrophic breakdown in the very fabric of an economy, leaving behind trails of social unrest and economic ruin. The underlying causes are complex, but they often boil down to a fundamental loss of confidence in the currency itself. One major culprit is unrestrained government spending, often fueled by unsustainable deficits. When governments print money to cover their expenses, rather than raising taxes or cutting spending, they inject excessive amounts of currency into the economy. Think of it like this: if you suddenly flood a market with a product, its value inevitably plummets. The same principle applies to money. Excessive money creation dilutes the value of each unit, leading to a rapid and often uncontrolled rise in prices. This is hyperinflation. We see this vividly illustrated in examples like the Weimar Republic in the 1920s, where a loaf of bread could cost millions, even billions of marks in just a short span. Beyond reckless government spending, other factors can trigger hyperinflation. These include external shocks, such as oil price spikes or trade wars, which can disrupt supply chains and destabilize economies, fueling inflationary pressures. Furthermore, political instability and a lack of confidence in government policies can erode public trust, leading to a rush to convert currency into tangible assets, further driving up prices. The consequences of such crises are far-reaching and deeply damaging. The impact on economies is catastrophic. Savings are wiped out, investments are destroyed, and economic growth grinds to a halt. Businesses struggle to operate under conditions of extreme uncertainty, while individuals face hardship and despair as the purchasing power of their earnings evaporates. The social consequences can be equally devastating, leading to widespread poverty, social unrest, and even violence. Consider the more recent examples. Zimbabwe's hyperinflation in the 2000s, reaching astronomical levels, serves as a chilling reminder of the potential devastation. Similarly, the Argentine peso has experienced multiple periods of hyperinflation and devaluation throughout its history, highlighting the recurring vulnerability of economies prone to unsustainable fiscal policies and a lack of trust in the government. These events are not isolated incidents. They underscore the persistent risks associated with poorly managed monetary systems, reminding us of the crucial role of sound fiscal policies and the importance of maintaining public confidence in the currency. The story of money, therefore, is not just a chronicle of progress, but also a cautionary tale of potential collapse.
The rise of cryptocurrency and its implications. Having witnessed the tumultuous consequences of hyperinflation and currency crises, we now arrive at a fascinating and potentially revolutionary development:
the rise of cryptocurrency. The events of the previous chapters, particularly the instability inherent in fiat currencies and the erosion of trust in centralized banking systems, have, in a way, paved the path for this disruptive force. Cryptocurrency, at its core, represents a radical departure from traditional monetary systems. It's a digital or virtual currency designed to work as a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value, using cryptography for security and to control the creation of new units. Unlike government-issued currencies, cryptocurrencies are decentralized, meaning they are not subject to government or financial institution control. Bitcoin, the first and most well-known cryptocurrency, emerged from the ashes of the 2008 financial crisis, a testament to the growing distrust in established financial institutions. Its underlying technology, blockchain, is a shared, public ledger that records every transaction in a secure and transparent manner. This distributed ledger system eliminates the need for a central authority, such as a bank, to verify and process transactions, making it inherently resistant to censorship and manipulation. Think of it like a digital, immutable record book that everyone can access and verify, making fraud nearly impossible. This decentralization is further amplified by the concept of decentralized finance, or DeFi. DeFi applications build upon the blockchain technology to provide financial services like lending, borrowing, and trading without the involvement of intermediaries. Imagine a world where you can access loans or trade assets directly with other individuals, bypassing traditional banks and their associated fees and regulations. It's a powerful concept with the potential to democratize finance, allowing individuals in underserved communities to access financial services they might otherwise be excluded from. The impact of cryptocurrency extends beyond simple transactions. Its impact on the future of money is profound and multifaceted. The rise of cryptocurrencies challenges the very foundations of established monetary systems. It raises questions about the role of central banks, the nature of sovereignty, and the future of global finance. While the volatility of cryptocurrencies and the regulatory uncertainty surrounding them pose significant challenges, their inherent characteristics of decentralization, transparency, and security offer a compelling alternative to traditional financial systems. The question is not whether cryptocurrency will play a significant role in the future of money, but rather the extent of that role and how it will reshape our understanding of finance and value itself. The journey from shells and beads to Bitcoin is a testament to human ingenuity and our continuous quest for better ways to manage and exchange value, a journey that is far from over.
The persistence of cash in a digital age. So, we've just explored the dizzying potential of cryptocurrencies, their disruptive power, and the inherent uncertainties that come with this new frontier. But even as digital currencies gain traction, cash, that seemingly archaic form of exchange, persists. Its resilience isn't merely a matter of inertia. It's deeply intertwined with the fabric of our global economy, playing a crucial, if often shadowy, role. This persistence, in fact, highlights some fascinating contradictions within our modern financial systems. One key area where cash remains dominant is the informal economy. Think about the countless small businesses, street vendors, and day laborers who operate outside the formal regulatory frameworks. These individuals, often marginalized and lacking access to formal banking systems, rely heavily on cash transactions. For them, cash offers a degree of anonymity and ease of use that digital alternatives often fail to match.
It's a vital lubricant for the day-to-day economic activity of a significant portion of the global population, a point often overlooked in discussions focused solely on the digital revolution. It's as if the digital world and the cash economy exist in parallel universes, sometimes intersecting, but often remaining distinct. This reliance on cash, however, also creates vulnerabilities. The very anonymity that empowers the informal economy simultaneously makes it vulnerable to exploitation and harder to regulate. This leads us to the second crucial point, the role of cash in illicit activities. The relative untraceability of cash transactions makes it an ideal tool for those engaged in illegal activities, from drug trafficking to money laundering to tax evasion. It provides a cloak of secrecy, hindering law enforcement efforts to track and disrupt criminal networks. Imagine trying to build a comprehensive digital audit trail for a black market trade. It's virtually impossible compared to tracking physical money, which makes the use of cash by illicit actors a persistent challenge. And this brings us to the final piece of this puzzle, the inherent challenges in tracking cash transactions. Unlike digital payments, which leave an electronic footprint, cash transactions leave few, if any, traceable records. This makes it exceedingly difficult for governments and regulatory bodies to monitor economic activity, assess tax revenue accurately, and combat financial crime. The sheer volume of cash circulating globally presents a monumental challenge in building a complete and real-time picture of how money moves. We can think of digital money as being like a transparent pipe. You can see exactly how much water flows and where it goes. Cash, on the other hand, is like a network of underground streams, difficult to fully map and monitor. This inherent opacity of cash continues to present significant challenges in a world increasingly focused on transparency and accountability. While the rise of digital currencies presents promising alternatives, the persistence of cash reflects the complex interplay of economic inclusion, regulatory challenges, and the enduring human need for both economic autonomy and secrecy. The next chapter, therefore, will focus on the ongoing struggle to balance these competing interests.
Money laundering and financial crime. We've just explored the enduring presence of cash in our increasingly digital world, a fascinating paradox in itself. But the persistence of physical currency, alongside the explosive growth of electronic transactions, creates fertile ground for a different kind of problem: financial crime, and most notably, money laundering. The sheer scale of illicit activity globally, from drug trafficking to human smuggling, from tax evasion to terrorism financing, generates astronomical sums of dirty money that needs to be cleaned, integrated into the legitimate financial system. Imagine trying to deposit a suitcase full of cash earned from illegal activities into a bank. The tellers would immediately be suspicious, triggering alarms. This is where the ingenuity of money laundering comes in. It's not a single technique, but rather a complex process involving several layers of obfuscation. One common approach is layering, where the proceeds of crime are broken down into smaller amounts and moved through a series of transactions, often across international borders, to obscure the original source. Think of it like a game of hide-and-seek on a global scale, where the money is constantly changing hands, shapes, and locations. Placement is the initial stage, getting the illicit cash into the financial system. This might involve depositing small sums into multiple accounts, using shell corporations or front businesses to disguise the transactions. Layering follows, involving numerous transfers, often through offshore accounts or complex financial instruments, making it almost impossible to trace the money's origin. Finally, integration is the last step, where the laundered funds are reintroduced into the economy as legitimate income, perhaps through investments in real estate or other assets. The fight against money laundering is a constant battle, a cat-and-mouse game between criminals and authorities. Anti-money laundering measures are crucial.
These include stringent know-your-customer regulations for banks and financial institutions, requiring them to verify the identity of clients and monitor their transactions for suspicious activity. International cooperation is also vital, as money laundering often transcends national borders. Global organizations like the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, set standards and encourage collaboration among countries to share information and track illicit financial flows. However, the challenge remains significant. The sophistication of criminal networks, the complexity of global finance, and the sheer volume of transactions make it incredibly difficult to detect and prevent all money laundering attempts. The fight against financial crime is ongoing, a crucial battle for maintaining the integrity of the global financial system.
The future of money, predictions, and possibilities. Having just examined the insidious world of money laundering and financial crime, a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities inherent in even the most sophisticated systems, we now turn our gaze towards the horizon. What does the future hold for the very concept of money itself? The possibilities are as vast and complex as the history we've just traversed, brimming with both exhilarating potential and unsettling uncertainty. One of the most significant shifts we can anticipate is a further evolution of digital currencies. We've already witnessed the rise of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, a decentralized system operating outside traditional banking structures. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. Imagine a future where central banks issue their own digital currencies, offering greater efficiency and transparency in transactions, while simultaneously mitigating the risks associated with unregulated crypto markets. This concept of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, presents a fascinating paradox. Greater control for governments, potentially enhancing regulatory oversight, yet also raising concerns about privacy and potential for government overreach. The balance between these opposing forces will be a defining challenge of the coming decades. Beyond CBDCs, the integration of blockchain technology and artificial intelligence into financial systems promises to revolutionize how we interact with money. Imagine seamless, instantaneous cross-border payments, microtransactions facilitated by the Internet of Things, and sophisticated algorithms detecting and preventing fraud with unparalleled accuracy. But this technological utopia isn't without its shadows. The very sophistication of these systems creates new vulnerabilities ripe for exploitation by cybercriminals and potentially even state actors. The potential for algorithmic bias, leading to discriminatory lending practices or unequal access to financial services, is a serious ethical concern demanding careful consideration. The future of money is not simply a technological problem, it's a societal one, demanding thoughtful consideration and proactive engagement from all stakeholders.